You will not believe what happens to the girl at the end. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can continue writing stories like this one. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
Silas was a cattle baron, which meant he owned a lot of land and a lot of cows. He lived in a big, fancy house on the highest hill. A house so big it made the schoolhouse look like a chicken coop. Folks called him rich, and he was, but lately Silas hadn't been feeling very rich at all. The sun beat down on the land like a blacksmith's hammer on hot iron. For months, no rain had fallen. The creek beds were cracked and dry, the grass turned brown and brittle, and the once lush fields that fed his cattle were now just dust bowls. Silas's cows were thin and their ribs showed. Silas was a man with a temper as fiery as the summer sun. When things didn't go his way, which was rare, he'd stomp and shout, turning red in the face like a boiled lobster. And lately, things hadn't been going his way at all. He paced the wide porch of his mansion, the floorboards groaning under his heavy boots. He looked out over his parched land, his jaw tight. He tried everything. He'd hired water diviners, men who claimed they could find water underground with just a forked stick. He'd even paid a traveling rainmaker, a fellow with a cart full of strange potions and promises, who danced and chanted under the blistering sun, but not a single drop had fallen. His advisors, men who usually agreed with everything he said, started suggesting he sell some of his cattle. Sell his cattle? That was like asking a king to give up his crown. Silas roared, sending them scurrying like frightened rabbits. He couldn't understand it. He had the best land, the most resources, the finest cattle. Why was this happening to him? It felt like the land itself was mocking him, the dry wind whispering insults in his ear. He remembered his father, a stern man who'd built the cattle empire from almost nothing. His father always said, control the land and you control everything. But Silas felt like the land was controlling him, squeezing the life out of him, one dry day at a time. The failing harvest weighed heavily on Silas. He saw his wealth, his power, his very identity withering away like the crops in his fields. And the angrier he got, the more desperate he became. He needed to do something, anything, to regain control, to prove that he was still the cattle baron, the master of his domain. The drought was not only drying up his land, but also his patience. It was about to boil over. While Silas fumed on his porch a few miles away, in the valley below, Martha hummed a little tune as she tended her apple trees. Martha was a widow, her husband having passed away a few years back from a bad cough. He left her with a small house, a patch of land, and a whole lot of determination. Unlike Silas's sprawling ranch, Martha's land was small, just enough for a little house, a vegetable garden, and her pride and joy, her apple orchard. It wasn't much to look at first, a scattering of young trees when her husband bought them, but Martha had poured her heart and soul into those trees. Where Silas had dry, cracked earth, Martha had a little creek running right through her property. It wasn't a big, rushing river, but a small, steady stream fed by a spring high up in the hills. This creek was the secret to Martha's success. Every day she hauled buckets of water from the creek to her trees, especially when the sun blazed hottest. It was backbreaking work, but Martha didn't complain. She knew those trees were her lifeline and the lifeline of many others in the valley. Her neighbors often stopped by to help, not because she asked, but because they wanted to. They knew Martha was always there for them, lending a hand when someone was sick, sharing her vegetables, or just offering a kind word. Martha was loved in the valley. Her orchard was a haven. The apple trees, heavy with fruit, provided shade and a sweet, comforting smell. Birds chirped in the branches and butterflies flitted among the blossoms. It was a peaceful place, a stark contrast to the dry, dusty landscape that surrounded it. Martha's apples were famous throughout the county. They were big and juicy, with a crisp, sweet taste that made everyone smile. She grew all sorts of apples, red ones, green ones, yellow ones, some tart, some sweet, but all delicious. She wasn't selfish with her bounty. She always shared her apples with anyone who needed them. The schoolteacher used them for baking pies for the children, the local doctor used them to make tonics, and the elderly folks in the valley enjoyed them as a healthy treat. Martha knew that hard work and kindness were the best crops of all. While Silas relied on his wealth and power, Martha relied on her own two hands and the strength of her community. And as the drought tightened its grip on the land, it was Martha's orchard that offered a glimmer of hope, a promise of sustenance in a time of need. Her small creek and determined spirit made all the difference. The final straw for Silas came one scorching afternoon. He rode out on his horse, Thunder, to inspect what was left of his fields. The sun glared off the cracked earth and the wind whipped dust into his eyes. He saw a few of his cattle, weak and listless, huddled under the sparse shade of a lone mesquite tree. They looked at him with pleading eyes, their ribs showing through their thin hides. A wave of fury washed over Silas, hotter than the desert sun. He felt like the land was laughing at him, mocking his powerlessness. All his wealth, all his influence, meant nothing in the face of this relentless drought. He couldn't bear it any longer. He spurred Thunder back towards the ranch, his mind racing with a terrible idea. He had to do something drastic, something that would show the land who was boss. He gathered his ranch hands, his face grim. "Burn it," he ordered, his voice low and dangerous. "Burn the fields. Burn it all." The ranch hands looked at each other in disbelief. They knew Silas had a temper, but this seemed like madness. "But Mr. Silas," one of them stammered, "that's all we have left. The cattle." "I said burn it." Silas roared, his eyes blazing. "I'd rather see it all turn to ash than watch it slowly die." Reluctantly, the ranch hands obeyed. They knew better than to argue with Silas when he was in this mood. They set fire to the dry grass, and soon, flames were licking across the fields, driven by the wind. The fire spread quickly, consuming everything in its path. The once golden fields were now a sea of fire and smoke. The sky turned black, and the air filled with the acrid smell of burning grass. Silas watched from his porch, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. He thought he would feel a sense of power, of control, but instead he felt a hollow ache in his chest. He had destroyed everything, and for what? The fire raged for hours, leaving behind a desolate wasteland. The fields were gone, the grazing land was gone, and with them went Silas's last hope. He had acted in anger, and now he was left with nothing but ashes and regret. The smoke billowed up, a dark cloud blotting out the stars above his mansion roof. A constant reminder of his foolish act. The waste was immeasurable, the destruction complete. He had not conquered the land. He had only destroyed himself. While Silas's land smoldered, a testament to his anger and despair, Martha's orchard stood in stark contrast. It was an oasis of green in a world of brown, a symbol of hope in a time of desperation. The apple trees, nourished by the little creek and Martha's unwavering care, were laden with fruit. The branches sagged under the weight of the ripe apples, their colors vibrant against the green leaves. The air was filled with the sweet, crisp scent of apples, a welcome change from the acrid smell of smoke that hung heavy in the air elsewhere. Martha surveyed her orchard with a grateful heart. She knew that many people in the county were struggling, their crops withered and their stores dwindling. She felt a deep responsibility to share her bounty, to help her neighbors through this difficult time. Already word had spread about Martha's plentiful harvest. People came from miles around, their wagons and carts bumping along the dusty roads, their faces etched with worry and hunger. They came to Martha, not begging, but with hopeful eyes, knowing that she would do what she could. The contrast between Silas's barren fields and Martha's thriving orchard was impossible to ignore. Silas had destroyed his livelihood in a fit of anger, while Martha had nurtured hers with hard work and compassion. He was alone in his mansion, surrounded by ashes, while Martha was surrounded by her community, their faces lit with gratitude. Every morning, Martha would wake up before dawn and begin picking apples. She worked tirelessly, filling baskets and sacks with the juicy fruit. Her neighbors helped her, children laughing as they ran through the orchard, their arms full of apples. It was a scene of community and cooperation, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, people could come together to support each other. She sold the apples at a fair price, enough to cover her expenses and keep the orchard running, but she also gave them away to those who couldn't afford them. She knew that some people were too proud to ask for help, so she would quietly leave baskets of apples on their doorsteps, a silent act of kindness. Martha's orchard became the heart of the community, a place where people could find not only food but also hope. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of hard work, and the strength of the human spirit. While Silas's actions had brought destruction and despair, Martha's had brought life and hope to a county in need. The community relied on her, and she, in turn, relied on them. The drought wasn't just Silas's problem or even just a problem for the farmers. It was a countywide crisis, touching every single person from the shopkeeper in town to the blacksmith at the edge of the valley. The lack of rain meant more than just dry fields. It meant empty stomachs and worried faces. The general store, usually bustling with activity, was now sparsely populated. Folks didn't have money to spend when their crops had failed and their livestock were suffering. The shelves were becoming bare, as supplies from other towns were slow to arrive, everyone dealing with similar problems. Children were going to school with rumbling tummies, finding it hard to concentrate on their lessons. The schoolteacher, Mrs. Peterson, did her best to provide them with extra food, but her own supplies were limited. She often relied on Martha's apples to supplement their meals, making apple pies and applesauce to nourish the children. Even the animals were affected. Horses and oxen, usually strong and reliable, were becoming weak and listless, making it difficult to transport goods and work the land. The birds, their usual food sources dried up, flocked to Martha's orchard, hoping to find a few scraps. The blacksmith, Mr. Johnson, found himself with less work than usual. Farmers couldn't afford to repair their tools or shoe their horses. He worried about providing for his family, his brow furrowed with concern. He, too, relied on Martha's kindness, trading his skills for a basket of apples to feed his children. The traveling preacher, Reverend Miller, spoke of faith and hope, but even his words couldn't completely ease the worries of his congregation. He organized prayer meetings, hoping for rain, but the sky remained stubbornly blue and cloudless. He knew that prayer alone wouldn't fill empty bellies. Action was needed. As the weeks turned into months, the situation grew more desperate. People started rationing their food, making meals stretch as far as they could. They shared what little they had with their neighbors, demonstrating the spirit of community that bound them together. The need for food was paramount. Without it, the county would slowly starve. Martha's orchard, therefore, became more than just a source of apples. It became a symbol of survival. It represented the hope that even in the face of adversity, they could find a way to endure, to support each other, and to overcome the challenges that lay ahead. The drought was a common enemy, uniting the county in their struggle for survival. And in that struggle, Martha's apples were a lifeline. Before the sun even peeked over the horizon, the first wagons began to arrive at Martha's orchard. They came slowly, their wheels kicking up dust on the dry road, each one carrying families desperate for food. The scene was a mix of hope and hardship. Old wagons, patched and creaking, sat alongside newer carts, all lined up patiently along Martha's lane. Farmers in worn overalls, their faces weathered by the sun, helped their wives and children down from the wagons. The air was filled with the quiet murmur of voices, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Martha, already up and working, greeted each family with a warm smile and a kind word. She knew most of them by name, having helped them in one way or another over the years. She directed them to the best trees, showing them which apples were the ripest and juiciest. The children's eyes lit up as they saw the abundance of fruit. They ran through the orchard, their laughter echoing through the trees, momentarily forgetting their hunger and worries. They helped their parents fill baskets and sacks, their small hands eager to contribute. The adults, though tired and weary, worked with a renewed sense of purpose. They carefully picked the apples, knowing that these fruits would sustain their families for the coming weeks. They offered Martha whatever they could in return, a few coins, a piece of cloth, a promise of future help. The gratitude was palpable. People thanked Martha profusely, their voices filled with sincerity. Some offered her hugs, others simply nodded their heads, their eyes conveying their heartfelt appreciation. They knew that Martha was their savior, their lifeline in this time of crisis. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the lane filled with more and more wagons. The orchard became a bustling hub of activity, a testament to Martha's generosity and the community's resilience. Despite the hardship they faced, people were united by their shared need and their gratitude towards Martha. Even though she was working tirelessly, Martha never lost her smile. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that she was making a difference, that her orchard was providing nourishment and hope to so many. She saw the worry lines on their faces ease. The light returned to their eyes, and she knew that her efforts were worthwhile. The first wagons arriving marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter of shared struggle and unwavering support, all centered around Martha's life-giving orchard. Silas watched from afar, his mansion perched on the hill overlooking the valley. He saw the long line of wagons snaking towards Martha's orchard, the grateful faces of the people as they collected their apples. A bitter taste filled his mouth. His pride had kept him away for days. He had told himself he didn't need Martha's charity, that he could find another way. But his cattle were dwindling, his stores were empty, and his ranch hands were starting to look at him with a mixture of pity and resentment. He was running out of options. Finally, he could bear it no longer. He knew what he had to do, but the thought of it made his stomach churn. He had to swallow his pride, admit his failure, and ask Martha for help. He saddled Thunder, his movements stiff and reluctant. As he rode down the hill, he felt the weight of his past actions pressing down on him. He had been arrogant and foolish, and now he was about to face the consequences. He joined the end of the line, his presence immediately drawing attention. People stared at him, their faces a mixture of surprise and curiosity. He kept his eyes fixed on the ground, his hat pulled low over his forehead, trying to avoid their gaze. He heard whispers behind him. "It's Silas," someone said. "What's he doing here?" He could imagine what they were thinking. The cattle baron reduced to begging for apples. It was a humiliating thought. As he slowly moved forward in the line, he saw Martha greeting each family with her usual warmth and kindness. He felt a pang of guilt. He had treated her with disdain in the past, dismissing her as a simple widow with a small orchard. Now she was the one holding the county together. When he finally reached the front of the line, he hesitated. He couldn't bring himself to look Martha in the eye. He mumbled something about needing apples for his ranch hands, his voice barely audible. He held his hat in his hands, twisting it nervously. The proud cattle baron, reduced to begging, hat in hand, for a peck of apples. The humiliation was complete. He waited for Martha's judgment, bracing himself for her scorn. He knew he deserved it. He just hoped she wouldn't turn him away. His survival, and the survival of those who depended on him, now rested in her hands. The drought had humbled him in ways he never thought possible. Martha looked at Silas, her heart softening at the sight of the once proud cattle baron standing before her, humbled and ashamed. She had heard about his burned fields, about his failing cattle, and about his growing desperation. She knew that he had brought this hardship upon himself, but she also knew that holding on to anger wouldn't help anyone. She could have easily turned him away, reveling in his humiliation. She could have reminded him of the times he had looked down on her, of the way he had dismissed her and her small orchard. But that wasn't in her nature. Instead, she offered him a warm smile, the same smile she offered to everyone else who came to her orchard. "Silas," she said, her voice gentle, "it's good to see you." Her kindness surprised him. He had expected anger, judgment, perhaps even a refusal. But Martha's eyes held no malice, only compassion. I need some apples," he stammered, still avoiding her gaze. "For my ranch hands." "Of course," Martha said, without hesitation. "Everyone needs apples right now." She didn't dwell on his past mistakes, didn't remind him of his arrogance. She simply treated him like any other neighbor in need. She filled a large basket with the best apples from her orchard, carefully selecting each one. "These should help," she said, handing him the basket. "And don't hesitate to come back if you need more." Silas was overwhelmed by her generosity. He had expected scorn, but he received kindness. He had expected rejection, but he received acceptance. He looked up at Martha, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Martha," he said, his voice choked with emotion. I don't know what to say." "Just pay it forward, Silas," Martha replied, her smile unwavering. "Help someone else in need. That's all I ask." She didn't hold his past against him. She offered him a chance to redeem himself, to learn from his mistakes, and to become a better man. Her act of kindness was a powerful lesson, a reminder that forgiveness and compassion are always stronger than anger and resentment. Silas, his heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and shame, knew that he had a long way to go to earn Martha's forgiveness, but he was determined to try. Her kindness was the first step on a new path, a path towards redemption and healing. He understood, maybe for the first time, the true meaning of community. As Silas turned to leave, the heavy basket of apples weighing on his arm, he paused. He looked back at Martha, who was already helping another family. An idea sparked in his mind, an unexpected offer born out of genuine remorse. He walked back to her, his steps hesitant. "Martha," he said, his voice clearer this time. I was wondering if you could use some help around here?" Martha looked at him, surprised by his offer. She had seen the strength in his hands, the way he used to command his ranch. She knew he possessed skills that could be valuable. "Help?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Silas replied, his voice filled with sincerity. "I know I haven't been much of a neighbor in the past, and I know I made a terrible mistake burning my fields. But I want to make amends. I have strong hands, and I'm not afraid of hard work. Maybe I could help you with the orchard." He explained that he could help her repair the fences, clear the weeds, and even dig a deeper well to ensure a more reliable water source for the creek. He offered his expertise and his labor not as a cattle baron, but as a man who wanted to make things right. Martha considered his offer carefully. She knew that accepting his help would be a risk. Some people might not understand, might think she was being too forgiving. But she also saw the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine desire to atone for his mistakes. "Silas," she said after a moment of silence, I appreciate the offer, and I believe everyone deserves a second chance. She explained that her biggest challenge was hauling water from the creek to the trees, a backbreaking task that took up most of her day. If he could find a way to make that easier, it would be a tremendous help. Silas's face lit up with hope. He knew he could do that. He could use his knowledge of engineering to devise a system that would bring water to the orchard more efficiently. He could use his resources to purchase the necessary materials. I can do that, Martha, he said, his voice filled with determination. I can build you a system that will make watering your trees much easier. He realized that helping Martha wasn't just about making amends for his past mistakes. It was about contributing to the community, about using his skills to make a positive difference. It was about finding redemption through service. Martha smiled, knowing that Silas's offer was more than just an act of charity. It was a genuine attempt to heal the wounds he had inflicted both on himself and on the community. His unexpected offer was the beginning of a new partnership, a partnership built on forgiveness, compassion, and a shared desire to create a better future. And so an unlikely partnership was formed. Silas, the former cattle baron, and Martha, the widowed orchard owner, began working side by side. At first, some people were skeptical, unsure whether to trust Silas's motives. But as they watched him labor tirelessly, his brow furrowed in concentration as he worked on the irrigation system, their doubts began to fade. Silas, using his engineering skills and remaining resources, designed a clever system of pipes and pumps that drew water from the creek and distributed it evenly throughout the orchard. It was a marvel of ingenuity, a testament to his intelligence and his newfound dedication. He worked alongside Martha, learning from her wisdom and her deep connection to the land. He learned about the different types of apples, about the importance of pruning, and about the delicate balance of nature. He rediscovered the satisfaction of honest labor, the pride in building something with his own two hands. Slowly, the community began to accept Silas back into their fold. They saw that he was a changed man, humbled by his experiences and determined to make amends. They saw that he was genuinely committed to helping Martha and the community thrive. The drought continued, but Martha's orchard, now more efficient and productive than ever, continued to provide sustenance for the county. Silas, no longer the isolated cattle baron, became an integral part of the community, sharing his knowledge and resources, working alongside his neighbors to overcome the challenges they faced. The sight of Silas and Martha working together, side by side in the orchard, became a symbol of hope and unity. It showed that forgiveness was possible, that even the most hardened hearts could be softened, and that even in the darkest of times, people could come together to support each other. The community learned a valuable lesson, that true strength lies not in wealth or power, but in compassion, resilience, and the willingness to help others. They learned that forgiveness is a gift, both to the giver and the receiver, and that it can pave the way for healing and reconciliation. The story of Silas and Martha spread throughout the county, inspiring others to put aside their differences and work together for the common good. The drought continued for many months, but the community, united by their shared struggle and their unwavering spirit, endured. And when the rains finally came, they came gently at first, then in torrents, soaking the parched earth and filling the empty creek beds. The land,